microphone, I might decide to sort of dive up and down just to keep you all awake and start falling asleep. It's a pleasure to be here, beautiful room that we're in. Particularly like the drums this morning. I didn't need the espresso before I got up and got here. That really woke me up well, so that was fun. I am a farmer, so a couple of non-disclosures before I start. I am not in my natural habitat. My natural habitat is outside in the field. If we were all outside now, I'd feel very comfortable, but this is not a particularly comfortable position for me. So if I start sort of diverting my conversation and not making a lot of sense, I apologise. The other thing is I swear a lot on the farm, so I'm going to really try hard not to swear. So if I do, I apologise. So just to put that out there. So I've been asked to basically just give you a bit of an insight into the effects that my perception, if you like, of climate change is having on my farming business, and hopefully give you a bit of an insight into how we try to mitigate and manage the sort of extreme weather events that we're starting to become used to. So just to give you a bit of an overview of our business, we are 100% organic. We're based in North Norfolk, sort of northwest Norfolk actually, on the Houghton Hall estate. So Houghton Hall neighbours Sandringham estate, which some of you might know. So it's roughly about 4,500 acres in total, all organic as I say. There's about 1,000 acres of woodland and permanent pasture. So that leaves us with roughly about 3,500 acres of croppable land. And then within that we have quite a diverse rotation, if you like. So we're quite unique. I don't think there's many farms in the country that will have a rotation such as we have. It's quite an old-fashioned rotation. So I'll talk in more detail about the vegetables, which is the part that I manage. But just to sort of give you an overview, there is a 500 head of Jersey cows on the farm, which are milked. All of that milk goes into Arla to McDonald's. We also have 500 head, roughly, of longhorn cows. So the role of the longhorns is to graze on the permanent pasture within the sort of middle of the estate and the farm. We also have 1,000 clings, so commercial breed of sheep. About 140,000 broiler chickens. We also have pigs on the farm, so a commercial bred BQP herd that all go into Waitrose. There's also a deer park on the farm, and then there's grass and clover, cereals and maize, which are basically used as a way of sort of feeding the fields, if you like, so feeding the soil. Also used as a bit of a break crop, and then we farm the veg. Sort of fitting in around that. So we work on a minimum 7-year rotation with the vegetables. So yeah, there's a lot going on. I think the estate converted to organic, or started to convert back in mid-90s, so about 95, 96. And what they quickly realised was that to have such a diverse amount of enterprises within that system, you need experts within each one. So it's no good trying to be good at growing carrots, for example, and good at knowing how to run a dairy herd. You need experts within those areas. So some of the farm is in-house, and the majority of the farm is actually tenanted. So the dairy, the pigs, the poultry, and the veg is all tenanted, and the rest is done in-house by a small team. But obviously, to make that work, we all have to work in each other's pockets. You know, we all have to basically get on and work very closely together. So, for example, any waste veg that we produce, once we've washed, graded and packed our produce, we bring back onto the farm and we feed to the livestock, which obviously then is a good source of feed and nutrition for them. And I'll talk a little bit more about the importance of livestock on another slide. One of the key things at Houghton for us is that when we came onto the farm in 2004, they invested in and built a reservoir for us. So as I discuss sort of the importance of mitigating climate change for us, water is absolutely up there as probably the most important thing, or one of the most important things for us. So they invested in a reservoir, 20 million gallons. That allows us to grow roughly about 350 to 400 acres of organic veg on the farm, and we have control of all of that water. So we can pump into it about 30 million gallons over the course of 12 months. So we have an abstraction licence for 365 days of the year. I do have a bit of bone of contention with the licence that we're under with the EA. So they have a use it or lose it policy. So essentially, in a year where it's particularly wet in the summer and we don't necessarily need the water because we're managing it correctly, we potentially could lose that abstraction licence, which to me is absolutely bonkers. Surely the whole point of having a reservoir is that you are good at managing and you put it on as and when you need it. But anyway, that's just one of those things. We also rent land elsewhere in Norfolk, so we're just going into a tenancy agreement with a farm in Norwich. So again, that's about 1,500 acres and has very much the same principles that we have sort of built and developed at Houghton over the years. And yeah, we're hoping this season to start there. But the key reason for us going to that farm again is that they have built a reservoir for us. So again, without having that there, we wouldn't go there. And yeah, just thought it was worth mentioning that we're certified by the Soil Association. So hopefully that's given you just a brief introduction. I could go on for ever and a day about it, so I'll leave it there. I am going to do death by PowerPoint, but it will be lots of pictures, so don't panic. There's not going to be lots of words. I make up for the lack of words. So this is just a picture of our reservoir back in late spring. So full to the brim, and you'll see some pictures later where throughout this year we've pretty much emptied it. So RB Organic as a business, we produce roughly 6,000 tonnes of carrots, 2,500 tonnes of spuds, and 1,000 tonne of onions. Predominantly everything that we grow goes into retail, and at the moment I think we're something like 90% of all organic carrots in retail are from us. So that's either from our farm or other growers that we work with in a cooperative that are supplied through our pack house in Peterborough. Ham weeding is our single biggest cost as a farming business. So we spend anywhere in the region of between 500 to 1,500 pound an acre, which is a huge cost. That's on a good year. If we have a bad year, like this year for example on onions, we spent the best part of £3,000 an acre. So before we actually got to a point where we're harvesting the crop, we know we're not going to make any money on it, unfortunately. And the reason for that, ironically, is rainfall. So I've got some stats which I'll show you in a minute, but in June of this year we had 129 mil in 40 hours. And the crop went from being a perfectly good onion crop that we thought was going to yield really well to an absolute disaster of a crop in the end. So I think it's one thing that I would say is, whilst we can do everything within our power to be as good as we possibly can, Mother Nature is still king. So we can do as well as we like, but when you get those sort of events happening, then there's not much we can do about it. As a farming team, there's only 5 of us, so if you were to compare us to a conventional business of the same scale, if you like, you would probably have half a person. So I think hopefully that just goes to show that organic farming is more intensive. It relies on having a slightly different mindset. I think our logic to growing is very preventative as opposed to reactive. So if we get a problem, it's too late, there's nothing we can do about it. So we have to be preventative and try and build resilience into our systems so that we prevent things from happening as opposed to just reaching for the can in the cupboard. So in order to do that, we work on roughly sort of 1 person to 100 acres. And that is actually management rather than necessarily just operators. So just, I thought I'd just show you a few pictures of what I aspire to achieve is the top picture. So that is a picture of a field of organic carrots that has essentially been drilled, come through cotyledon stage, first true leaf. It's not been touched with a hand weeder at that stage. It's just about to be touched. And that's a perfect example of what I'd like to have every single time I grow carrots, but unfortunately that's not reality. What is more reality is the picture on the bottom left. So prior to drilling the crop, we create a stale seed bed, we drill the carrots into it, but the stale seed bed is essentially a gas burner that we use. So as the weeds chip, we run over the gas burner, which, when we're talking about carbon footprint, doesn't fill me with a lot of joy. It sort of makes the collar sweat a little bit, but it is cost effective. So to put it in perspective, 1 parts with a burner is the equivalent of about £40 an acre, which when I'm paying up to £1,000 an acre with 1 pass of a hand weeder, it's quite a substantial difference. So we'll have burnt the field, the crops come through, we can do anything within the, I'll just use this. So in between the rows there, we can keep that clean really easily with mechanical hose, brush weeders. But actually, where the rows of carrots are, we can't. There's nothing out there at the moment that will weed that. So we have to get people in, it looks backbreaking and antiquated and horrible. For me personally, I quite enjoy it. It's quite a simple, mind-numbing, just lay down all day for 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, picking weeds, not really worrying about anything, listening to a bit of music. I quite like it. It's my type of work, so that's fine. But we're bringing in sort of local GLA licensed staff. They are predominantly Lithuanian workers, but the lady on the side there, Rita, she's been working with us for 10 years. She's about this tall, in her mid-50s, absolutely mental. I would not cross her. She is, a woman with an iron fist, so she keeps everybody working well. The importance of soil management in resilience of climate change. So if I go back to the very first soil samples that we did on the farm, so if you look at when it first converted from conventional into organic, it's worth noting at this point that we have soil sampled every field every year since conversion. We were seeing P's and K's around -1s and 2s, soil organic matters around 0.5 to 1%. In fields that have been in organic for 15 years, say, roughly, when we're going into them and sampling them now, we're seeing 3s and 4s, roughly. Sometimes they're still down in the 2s, but that's a long way from the -1s and 2s, and that's all been done through having a proper rotation, having livestock within the rotation. And I can't emphasise enough how important for us having livestock in the rotation is. And I actually, I'm not trying to be small-minded here, but I actually can't see a way to grow organically the way we do without having livestock in the rotation. I'm not suggesting that they necessarily need to be eaten, but we have to have them to make our system work. So I think by having livestock in the rotation, what it's allowed us to do is make money out of having grass and clover. And grass and clover has been fantastic in building soil organic matter, and also for weed suppression. It's a fantastic tool for weed suppression. Obviously then, by having them in houses over winter and using straw, we're creating compost, if you like. So anything that's farmyard manure gets put into a pile, we compost it for 18 months, and then we put it on the field, roughly around 15 tonnes to the acre. And I genuinely believe that's probably the single biggest reason that our soil organic matters have risen up to around the 1.5%, which doesn't sound phenomenal, but on sandlands, and believe you me, it is sandlands, 1.5% is actually very, very good. So livestock, as I say, are an important part. I think Chickens, particularly the muck that we get from chickens, when we put that on in front of cereals, is increased our yields. What we have to be careful of with having fertile fields in an organic system is weeds. And one of the things that I think has been most enlightening and helped us over the last sort of 10 years is applying what we've learnt in vegetable farming, in cereal farming. And we've actually been able to reduce the overall weed burden on the farm by applying a lot of the techniques that we've learned. So, for example, in our spring barleys and spring oats, we now miss out every other row of, bloody hell, I've only got 5 minutes left. We miss out every other row of cereals, and we take our inter-row Garford hoe down the rows, and we can weed very close up to the plants. And that is very, very important when it comes to keeping the farm clean. Because as we take a field once every 7 years for carrots, if we've had 6 years of just letting it go to wreck and ruin, then it creates a problem for us. We have a policy of not leaving a field bare whenever possible. It's not always practical, but we try and always have a cover on it. So we've very much worked towards having either all radishes or mustards, which are good at, again, weed suppressant. They're good at getting a taproot down into the soil. They're a fantastic soil organic matter builder. And also they're quite a good winter feed for sheep, for grazing out. One of the things we've done with following organic potatoes to make sure we don't have volunteer crops, if you put winter cover crops out and then graze them off, that gets rid of all your volunteer potatoes. So that's been quite a good learning for us. I think understanding crop requirement is really important because, again, not having the ability to just go and put lots of artificial fertilisers on, there are certain things like carrots, for example, that we know don't actually need a lot of nitrogen. So when you know that it doesn't need a lot of nitrogen, you don't need to sort of break the bank and apply lots of nitrogen on. In fact, it can cause other problems. I went to a farm in Denmark a few years ago that had a terrible problem with sclerotinia. And I walked into the field and the carrot tops were up to my waist. And I couldn't believe that it was that high. And then to my complete dismay, they were injecting slurry, thinking that they were going to get better yields by pumping the soil full of fertility. When in actual fact, they were creating a microclimate that was just absolutely awful and creating other problems for them. So understanding crop requirement is definitely important. Anecdotally, I think I have seen, certainly in my 10 years or 11 years on the farm, we have got now healthy living soils because of this approach and the rotation that we've got. And when we have really heavy downpours of rain or we have periods of drought, because we've got this system and our organic matters are such and the soil I believe is alive, the crops come through it. That said, 2018, following the beast from the east, and then the hottest summer on records, we recorded soil temperatures of around 50 degrees at one point. Nothing grows in those conditions. So there's, as I said earlier, there's only so much resilience that you can build into your soils. I'm going to have to keep cracking on because I've only got 5 minutes left apparently, and I've got about half a presentation to go. I should have practiced it before I started. So in order to manage water, we use soil moisture probes. So these are basically digital stations that we put in the field. They connect to a satellite and send us live emails and updates. So we know what our crop requires in terms of moisture at certain growth stages at certain times of the year, and that allows us to completely micromanage the use of water on the farm. I think, Rosemary, you touched on sort of the effects of rainfall on cavity spot. Touch wood, we don't see cavity spot. So you speak to conventional carrot farmers, their biggest problem is cavity spot. We don't have it. We just never see it because we manage our water levels properly, and our soils are alive and they're healthy, and we don't get cavity spot. I can't really explain it any other way than that. We've no proof as such, but we don't get cavity spot. So, yeah, interesting. We've several different techniques of applying water. Predominantly it's boom and gun, so we use a boom for early stages of crop growth so that we're putting little and often, not putting too much on at one time, small droplets. But again, going back to 2018 when we were 35 degrees temperatures, you could pull the boom out, wet the field, give it 10 minutes and it was dry as a bone again. So this was earlier in the summer. You saw the picture earlier of the full reservoir. This was earlier in the summer this year, 2019, just gone, completely empty. So within the space of around about 8 weeks, we went from full to empty. So potatoes take an enormous amount of water early on, and then we move on to carrots and onions. And even with the health of the soil and the management of water going on at the right times, the right growth stages, we still ran out. So we put on, I think, the equivalent of about 6 acre inches, so 1 acre inch 6 times on potatoes. On carrots we put on 4 acre inches in total, but we did it in sort of 50% lots, so it'd be 15 mil each time. So I thought this was a particularly interesting slide. So this is rainfall data collected on the farm over the last 7 years. So in terms of consistency, our average rainfall is about 630 millimetres a year. But there are some very striking anomalies throughout the months in the year. So if you take, for example, 2018, we had a total of 17 mil in June. In 2019, we had 129 mil, and that fell in 40 hours. So quite how you manage anything under those sort of conditions or differences year to year is pretty much impossible. And that's where the sort of reliance on having healthy soils is paramount. So yeah, I just thought that was an interesting slide to show you. How much time have I got? Because of 2 minutes. Well, Rosemary's done a fairly good job talking about some of the pest pressures that we face into. I think really what I was trying to illustrate here is that we're not normal. I'm definitely not normal, as you might can see. We take a preventative approach, but I think if you go back to 2015, we had a massive infestation of aphids out of nowhere. And that sort of absolutely forced us into thinking what we're doing isn't working as well as it might work. We also had the loss of a couple of organic insecticides that we were using at the time. So we're using Savona, which was a fatty acid, so a bit like Persil, and that would kill aphids and not kill beneficial insects. So we had to think about how we might start to control pests in a different way that didn't rely on chemicals as such, whether they're organic or not. So that sort of forced us down the route of actually getting in touch with Rosemary to learn more about the life cycle of the pests. So learning about carrot fly and aphids and how they habitate, where they habitate, how they mate, when they come out of margins, when they're likely to affect the crop, how many life cycles that we were going to see in a season. So getting a real sound understanding of the pest first and foremost before we then work out how we're going to control it. So we reached out to a company called Koppert, who are based in Holland, but they have an office in the UK. Richard Binks, which some of you may have heard of. So he basically came in and we worked on a programme of enhancing the biodiversity on the farm. So at Houghton, somewhere in the region of 30% of the entire farm is out of agricultural production. So it's in pollen nectar mixes or just sort of wild bare strips. So getting then the right plants in there was really important. So he helped us make sure we got the right plants. And then we sort of moved on to the next stage, and that was the introduction of beneficial insects. So for the last 3 years, we've been releasing on a field scale things like ladybirds, lacewings, parasitic wasps, hoverfly. It's been sort of done for years in glass houses, but it's never really been done on a large scale outdoors. So we started to do that, and we saw within the first year a complete control of aphids. So we had fields covered in aphids in mid-May, but because we'd managed to get the beneficial insect populations to a certain level prior to the pest coming in, it sort of just dealt with it there and then. So you would find mummified aphids, but they would be dead. Carrot fly is probably the most interesting one that we've learned how to control, and we've done that using endoparasitic nematodes. So everybody's probably heard of parasitic nematodes and free-living nematodes, which are problems in the soil for plants, but there is also a type of nematode that will attack insects. So we've managed to weed that out, and we've been applying that through irrigation, and that has been, again, particularly successful. So where we applied on areas we were getting 20 to 25% carrot fly, we're now getting 3 to 5%. So that's been really successful. Last year, because of the summer, we didn't get any carrot fly, so who knows whether it works or not. We didn't really need to put it on, but we did anyway, just so we could sleep better at night, which a lot of farmers do, I think. So yeah, that is a video, but I think we're probably not going to bother showing it because we're running out of time. But what I was trying to illustrate here was that we are intensive to a certain degree, but you can live alongside a biodiverse landscape. So to the right of that tractor is a beautiful 6-metre pollen nectar mix. We then have all of our headlands either grass and clover or white clover mixes, and then you're straight into the field. We did start putting effectively like beetle banks down the field to try and encourage beneficial insects down into the field, but unfortunately, because it has to be autumn sown, we haven't been able to replicate that. Oh, it is going to play. Well, we'll skip it.
I might have to stop you there then, Joe. That's fantastic, because I can see that you're so passionate. This is very thank you very much to both Rosemary and Joe, both really insightful and seeing both sides of that perspective. And it actually, I shouldn't have probably stopped you, because this is something that I think is actually probably a really good discussion point from here on, is that, and it'd be very nice to have a time just to pick the brains of both of you on where are these flaws in our organic systems that are producing these amazing effects and as parts of resilience, but where are those flaws? And where should we be going? And we've got 5 minutes, so an easy one. But whether anyone's got any questions, that'd be great. But just before we start the questions, in St. Alder's room, just through this door on the left, me, Joe, and Rosemary will both be there for the next hour. So if you want to continue this discussion or ask any questions, burning questions, we'll have time after. So, okay, we'll just take a number of questions then. Is that okay? Thank you very much. Yeah, okay.